Kewal Handa joins us, A. Vaidheesh, they both join us, and we would be discussing what everybody needs after the fall. Dua and Dawai, right? Everybody needs Dua and Dawai right now after what's happened to the market. So I don't know whether Dua तो ऊपर वाले की आती है, दवाई के बारे में बात करते हैं. Should we start discussing pharma and Dawai? Vaidheesh, Mr. Handa?
Yeah.
So, hi, Vaidheesh.
Hi, Kewal.
Okay. Let's understand the compulsion and the template at play for Indian pharma companies to come under the tariff regime. Vaidheesh, if pharma prices go higher via tariff, Indian pharma companies will pass it on. They don't have the margins to digest it. If they will pass it on, US healthcare will go higher. So, I mean, if I really use the word common sense, pharma tariff should not come. Am I right in using my common sense and making this prediction, Vaidheesh?
Yeah. But Nikhil, what you said is absolutely common sense, is really common. First and foremost, we need to understand pharma industry is very different in this whole tariff conversation. The reason is pharma industry is now being reviewed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Basically, it is giving a power to government of USA to restrict the import of items or articles that are deemed to threaten or impair the national security of USA. So here we are not talking about whether your tariff is big or not. Now there is a review that's going on. So we should quickly understand what the review means. Basically, India has done a great job of responding to pandemic or during COVID to supply supply chain security has been fantastic. The Indian companies have responded and supplied to the United States in a very quick turnaround. Whether you look at chloroquine, which was required immediately and we supplied, and whether it's a paracetamol that was required or a Paxlovid, they all went from India and we solved. So we have a good track record of ensuring supply chain security, right? So frankly, in my opinion, if they have to assess the collaborative work of India in the pharma industry, very little to worry about the security, because we have been a friendly country to the United States, and we have never had any bad reputation because we supply large volume of generic, right? So frankly, in my opinion, if at all, anything they may look at is probably what they call it the clean supply chain that they may be looking at. Now, that's the reason why we always, as an industry, we have been looking at how to build our ecosystem of starting material, APIs within India to make sure we are self-sufficient throughout. Now, that's the only concern that I would have. Otherwise, we have a fantastic relationship with the United States. For them to have a tariff and increase the cost to the patient for a chronic disease, I would be surprised, like you.
Mr. Handa, that's the question, right? Because you don't know which way the tariffs are headed. Would one be right in the assumption that it's an all clear for pharma, or you think not quite?
Very good morning to all of you. If you heard his recent interview, he said that the administration is looking at potential tariffs in pharmaceuticals in near future and not in distant far, he said. That's very, very clear for him. Near future, maybe 1 week or maybe 1 month, but not more than 3 months to my mind. And distant future is ruling out completely. And therefore, the review of pharmaceutical tariff is going to happen. It goes without saying. What would be the percentage is something debatable. To my mind, he may go with a 26%, or he may go with a 10%, which is the reciprocal duty, which the India imposes 10% on imports from US. Now, whichever way you look at it, that's going to be some impact on Indian pharmaceutical industry. The question is, Trump is also asked US-based companies like Pfizer and Lilly to invest in US, to set up plants in US, and they're committed to do so. They also believe that some of the big other generic companies would also set up plants in US. So it's not that, as Vaidheesh was saying, that he is going to depend only on India for supply of goods. Today, we supply almost 40% of the medicines consumed in US is by Indian. But going forward, he may would also like to change this. And therefore, we Indian companies have to be prepared for the worst scenario. And the worst scenario is 26% tariff. If that happens, how do we position ourselves in US, and how do we get that business outside US to increase our footprints, which is just about 20% in other countries, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, and so and so. I think the big call is the Indian companies should not panic, but seize this opportunity to expand the market, what they are doing currently.
For a minute, Mr. Handa, I assume, and I hope I'm sincerely wrong, the tariffs are at 26%. So what will happen to Indian pharma companies who export out of US? I mean, they will have to pass it on. Or US companies will start manufacturing. Now, you've been with an MNC pharma company, so you would understand that whether manufacturing of pharma could happen in US or not. So there are only two alternatives, sir. Dawai ki jarat to hai, you cannot change it. But it has to be substituted. How will that be substituted in US then?
So some of the Indian companies like Lupin, Reddy's, Sun, Zydus do have manufacturing base in US also. Now, so the one option for them is to scale up in US. That's very clear option. For those who have already set up, but those who want to set up a greenfield is going to be a tough to do it. Obviously, what Indian companies have to do is A, to get the scale somewhere else so the cost comes down, and B, to look at it and passing out some to the consumer and some to absorb. The biological companies are going to suffer the most because their margins are very thin. And those are the products which really the US is not too concerned right now. They're more concerned with the other generic products. So my feeling is generic companies would be able to pass on some tariff. Now, out of 26%, how much you're going to pass is the competitive pricing in US. If everybody is on the same footings, then everybody will try to pass on the tariff to the consumer. But in 1 year, you will not be able to pass on 26%. Assuming even if you're able to pass on 50% of that tariff, you are still able to manage your profitability in US.
Right. Vaidheesh, back in 2020, the world global economies did question that how much and why they have so much of dependence on China when it comes to their API requirements. But now that in 2025, when there are more tariffs on China versus India is what the case is looking like at this point in time, do you believe it is again time to look at some of the Indian CDMO players where they can have a better picture versus some of the Chinese players, and they can do better in the times ahead?
Yeah, what you said is pretty much I would tend to agree. It is a window of opportunity for Indian CDMO because I think we have really improved our standards and quality. Most of the companies that are operating, good scientists out there who have the ability to deal with US companies, the project management capability has improved. And, frankly, in my opinion, this is one good opportunity for India. Make sure you have a clean supply chain. That's going to be important. Your, starting materials to intermediates to API, they will be asking them to make everything in India. So that's going to be one small challenge. But frankly, in my opinion, that can be overcome by most of the people. I do see this as a good opportunity.
Okay. I want to go back to this whole manufacturing aspect. Let's assume that US wants manufacturing to come to US. Let's assume. But where is the capability? Where is the manpower? Where is the ability? And US FDA approvals, I mean, we've seen what's happened during COVID. It has been a nightmare when the supply chains have got disturbed. So while the attempt could be to move manufacturing back to America, but एक बार कहते हैं ना हिंदी में वो चिड़िया दाना खा के उड़ गई है. That manufacturing culture has shifted. अब पछतावत क्या था, चिड़िया चुग गई खेत. Remember हिंदी में पढ़ते थे. Muhavra. Yeah, it's actually happened. Manufacturing has shifted.
Yeah, idioms.
He is redefining the entire pharmaceutical territory, or you could say the ground reality. Now you don't know because when if you have Pfizer and Lilly is committing to manufacturing, and if you have some of the big generic company committing to manufacturing, obviously the question would be the cost. The cost would definitely be higher as compared to companies manufacturing in India or from US. Now, what is he going to manufacture there? That's a big question. Is he going to manufacture generic formulations or its API? To my mind, the focus would be to counter China. And if they want to counter China, they're also import a lot of API. So the scale will come in API, the manufacturing come in API, and there you don't require a large manpower. I think that's where the focus would be. I don't think so. You would be focusing more on manufacturing the finished products. But API, I'm sure there's something that the focus would be on to counter China.
If you are for a minute become a pharma stock investor, सबसे interesting question. For a minute, if you have to become a pharma stock investor, what would you buy? And Mr. Handa, I'm coming back to you, sir. I'm coming back to you with the right question. Vaidheesh, your turn now. What would you buy?
You're asking me?
Yes, yes.
You know what, Nico? I'm an eternal optimist. Okay, I would continue to be looking at, of course, the CDMO companies are definitely a good bet. I would also continue to bet on all big companies. All the big companies like Sun Pharmas and Zydus. All these companies have a very strong lineage, and they've got established processes. And I also believe this particular review mechanism that may end up in a very, very specifically essential goods kind of, as you rightly mentioned, setting up a pharma ecosystem is not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. And most of the MNCs are working on innovation, and they depend on countries like India and China for their, what they call it as the fail fast. For essential drug discovery, you need to fail fast, right? So that means you need a very nimble-footed, collaborative approach from the other countries. So my personal belief is to take a dramatic step on this industry by having 26% tariff. I don't think that may not be as much as that. There might be some impact. It may not be as bad. Frankly, in my opinion, it's an opportunity for the Indian pharma industry. More than I look at it as a negative aspect of pharma industry. I'm continued to be positive on pharma industry, on the investments.
Wrap it up with one final point that within pharma, while we can use the word generic at general, but within pharma, sir, you understand that there is a lot of complexity. There is oral generic, there are injectables, there are biosimilars. I hear there is something called peptide, there is something called specialty drugs. Every day I read something new. So within the pharma space, where do you think Indian companies have a moat which cannot be replicated? I mean, for example, if somebody has a technology or a cycle advantage or a cost advantage, doesn't matter what tariffs are, export will happen from India. Which are those 2-3 categories where replacement is difficult, if not impossible?
This is to me?
That's right, Mr. Handa.
So I think the first to answer your question, I would put my bet on API companies. I would put my bet on Zetsa Davies and Loris and all that, all those API. Second, I would put my bet on a lot of CDMA companies. They would be the one who could take the maximum opportunities to supply in China. Now to answer your question, you see, US doesn't depend much upon biosimilars from India. Let's face it very frankly. So it's not that they're going to give any preference to biosimilars. Neither, the large scale volume consumption is branded generics in the generics space. And that is where the cost advantage to US is happening right now. And they cannot say that I will have different categories in these generic drugs and have a different tariff rates for these categories. That's not going to happen. So they will be very cautious to saying that if 40% is consumed on the generic drugs, and if I increase the tariff, then what is the impact of the inflation in US, particularly in the pharmaceutical? I think that's the moot point which the US government will be debating on. But I don't think so they will have a different treatment for different category or different products within the pharmaceutical industry.
All right, sir. Appreciate your time. Like I said at the beginning, dua and dawa. Well, we've discussed dawa at least for a change, and we've discussed it extensively. Vaidheesh,
you.
smile. Vaidheesh is gone. Vaidheesh,
That dawa-
smile.
दुआ हम लोग यही करते हैं कि pharmaceutical industry in India should take that opportunity to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.